well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I'm glad you're with me on the program today. We're going to be talking with NRA-ILA Executive Director John Commerford here in just a couple of minutes about Trump's executive order, about the NRA's priorities in Congress, as well as what they are looking at in the state legislatures, both good and bad, because there are a lot of bad bills floating around out there. And we'll get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report as well. I also want to let you know that tomorrow on the program, we'll be talking with David Yamane from Wake Forest about Gun Culture 2.0. But right now, let's kick off our conversation with NRA-ILA Executive Director John Commerford. Take a look and a listen. John, it's so good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the program today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Cam. Good to see you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, for folks who don't know your background, you are, of course, the NRA-ILA Executive Director, and you've been with NRA for what? I don't want to give you more time than you've spent, but what, about 17 years? Is that right?
Yeah, I had a lot more hair on my first day at the office. Literally, it was a lot. But yeah, I started NRA as an intern back in the summer of 2007.
Wow!
Moved up from there.
That is that's fantastic to hear. And so let me ask you first off. I mean, I do want to talk specifically about like Trump's executive order. I want to talk about NRA's priorities in Congress and the state legislature, or state legislatures around the country. But I just want to ask you, what are your goals as executive director of the Institute for Legislative Action?
Well, we have a few. Obviously, pass pro-gun legislation and stop freedom-infringing anti-gun legislation at the federal and state level. But I think what you'll see is one of my main goals is making people more aware of what NRA actually does. I actually have a screenshot that I keep on my phone from when we won the Bruen case, which, the Bruen case was from start to finish was NRA's case, cost over $3 million. It's one of our crowning achievements. But NRA's name is not on the case. It's New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, which is our state affiliate there. But I have this screenshot from a Fox News article that says, NRA wins at the Supreme Court. And the first comment on Instagram was, what is NRA going to do for me in New York? And we run into that a lot. But I want to cry from the mountaintops on what NRA is doing. And I think you'll see a new strategy from NRA with NRA's name actually on cases. We've done a few of those this year, and making people more aware of specifically what ILA does at NRA.
Well, listen, I'm looking forward to having more of those conversations. And I have to say, just as a 2A advocate, it is great to see NRA, getting back into more litigation. I got to say, I'm very pleased that you guys have been partnering with other 2A organizations, not just, state affiliates, but other 2A organizations, nationwide 2A organizations. I think we as gun owners and as segment advocates we're at our best when we are a big tent. And so it is great to see, NRA and some of these other groups joining forces in protecting and strengthening our right to keep and bear arms. I've been very, very gratified to see that.
Yeah, I mean, we brought in Joe Greenlee. He's our head of our litigation counsel operation. We had Mike Jean before that, who was excellent. He was an excellent attorney for us, and he moved on, but it opened up an opportunity to bring in Joe Greenlee, who is one of the leading Second Amendment lawyers in the country.
Yeah, and
he is an amicus brief writing machine. I'm amazed every day. I wish he would get a little more sleep, if I was being honest with you, but he has a work ethic like no other, and Aaron Earhart, who's on his team, is doing a great job. But let's face it, when we get into some of these egregious pieces of legislation that get enacted into law, we had the Bruen temper tantrum response bills, and we just have other petri dish of bad ideas states like California. When they pass this, it's a break glass in case of emergency situation. So Second Amendment Foundation, FPC, NSSF. We're all in it for the right reasons, and we want to further the rights, and we want to beat back against those states that are trying to take away your rights. And working together with them is just the right thing to do. They've been good partners on this. We've brought back outside counsel that had left during the last few years. So, I mean, look at the roster of outside attorneys we use. We use Paul Clement, we use Noel Francisco, we use Chuck Cooper, and the teams that they surround themselves with. And there's plenty of other partners in Bradley Aaron and Schnell and Wilmer. I mean, we have a list of folks that we work with that are at the top of their game. It's expensive, but they're expensive for a reason, because they win, and winning is what matters here.
So before we get to the federal stuff, let's talk about what's going on at the state level. Because again, you talk about some of these temper tantrums and some of these egregious assaults on our right to keep and bear arms. SB 3 in Colorado, the gas operated semi-auto ban. You've got this being run in New Mexico as well, Rhode Island. I suspect we're going to see similar versions introduced in states like California, New York. They're going to once again revise this made-up term of what an assault weapon is to broaden it out even further. The Supreme Court, John, it's got an AWB case pending before it, right? We don't know if they're going to grant cert to Snope, but in the meantime, we're seeing the anti-gunners, I think, really take advantage of the Supreme Court silence, and they are going big on these gun bans this year. I mean, that seems to be their top priority.
That's exactly right. Until we get the Supreme Court to take a hardware case and provide good guidance, these aren't going to stop. The states are going to continue to push that envelope. Now, look, the worse the piece of legislation, the better the chances are that the Supreme Court will take it and we can get a good opinion. However, that's not going to stop our efforts to try to stop these things, because if one of these passes, the poor people in these states have to live under that standard. Sometimes, without compensation, you're having to get rid of your valuable property. And we got in Colorado, look what happened in Aurora with the gangs. I mean, if there's an example on why you need a semi-automatic firearm with a standard capacity magazine, that's it. However, they're not going to stop. And until we get the Supreme Court to take one of these cases, it is going to continue. And there are cases behind this one that have different facts. The perfect formula for the Supreme Court is having a circuit split where two different circuits and two different groups of Americans are bound by different case law. That's sort of that secret formula. Sometimes, not all the time. So we're not going to stop. Even if they don't take this one, we're going to have another one coming. I know Joe Greenlee's probably sitting behind his computer right now working on a complaint for Colorado, because we will sue, and we will sue on day one. And it is, the Polis gun ban. We need to stop that. In New Mexico, same thing. You're seeing a never-ending push to restrict the rights of New Mexicans. So we're going to be working there. I mean, here in Virginia, we're going to be relying on Governor Youngkin again to veto a litany of bills. I think it was at least a dozen last time. So it's, we got to get through this session, and then, you get right into the off-year election where we got to get Winsome Sears in there and keep this thing going, because without Governor Youngkin, you're here in Virginia, I'm here in Virginia, our rights are going to look the same as those of people in California. So we're seeing red states get redder, blue states get bluer. But in the end, all of these things are going to end at the Supreme Court. And until we get good guidance from them, we're going to live in this constant state of evolution on the issue.
Absolutely. And as you say, I mean, the red states are getting redder. We are seeing some progress, and maybe even constitutional carry in North Carolina this year, although I think it's going to would have been easier to do it last year when Republicans had the supermajority. But to that end, I mean, let's talk about that for a second, John. You talk about the red states getting redder, the blue states getting bluer. It was 15 years ago, a quarter of the Democrats in Congress were A-rated by the NRA. I mean, that's an amazing figure, because you look now, I don't think there's one A-rated Democrat in Congress.
No, there's not.
So, listen, and part of that obviously is the Democrats moving far to the left, right, in reaction to things like Heller and McDonald and Bruen. But I think our rights are more secure when you've got members of both political parties who respect and understand the importance of this right. What can we do to start to shift the Democrat Party, at least some members of the Democrat Party, back towards Second Amendment sanity?
In 2008, NRA endorsed 63 Democrats in the U.S. House for election. and they were what we call blue dog Democrats. That species of Democrat is extinct. We've seen on the state level, particularly, we had lots of Democrats that supported Second Amendment rights. Notably, look at states like Kentucky, West Virginia, but the party has left them. We saw numerous members of the Democrat Party in those states switch to Republicans, and or as a reflective of where the national party has gone. And if you think that they're going to come back, I mean, it's mistaken, because look at what the DNC just did. I mean, they put David Hogg as vice chair. I mean, if that doesn't signal any clear intent on the party continuing to move this hard progressive left shift, I don't know what else does. So we're going to see, the most egregious forms of gun control come out of their national party platform and continue to drive that. But look, there's still some hope. I mean, look at I don't want to put too much stock in this, but look at the evolution of John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. He's a couple steps away from becoming an independent and then moving to a Republican. Now, he's rabidly anti-gun, but that doesn't mean we're not going to talk to John Fetterman about constituent service to the over 1 million permit holders in Pennsylvania for concealed carry reciprocity. We have an overwhelming number of blue-collar labor union members at NRA. They overwhelmingly want their gun rights. And what does someone like John Fetterman go for? He's a union Democrat in certain aspects. He's sort of left that progressive side. So, we're going to go talk to him. We may agree to disagree on the worst gun control that he supports, but that doesn't mean we can't try to get him on board with concealed carry reciprocity. So we're not going to lose hope. You see Jared Golden in Maine. He signed on as a co-sponsor for concealed carry reciprocity. Now, everyone on your show knows that he famously flip-flopped in the last Congress to support gun control. He probably would have been endorsed by NRA as the path he was on, but then he ended up earning an F. So we'll see what other members of the House, what they do as we head into this Congress in this new world that we're in under President Trump's leadership.
Yeah. And so let's talk about President Trump's leadership. It wasn't day one, but we did see this executive order last Friday directing the Attorney General to look at every federal regulation, every federal gun law, look at all of the existing stances that the Department of Justice has taken in terms of prosecuting federal gun laws. This is a hugely important executive order, John, and talk about what you want to see, what ILA wants to see come out as a result of this executive action.
Well, first, before we get into what we're looking at, let's take a look at who President Trump has surrounded himself with. If you look at the first Trump administration, it took some time before we had people who are truly knowledgeable about Second Amendment issues in the White House. That's totally different this time. From day one, President Trump has populated the White House with folks in senior positions who truly believe in the Second Amendment, who practice and exercise that right on the weekends as part of their hobbies. They're hunters. Obviously, Don and Eric Trump are as true of believers as you can get, and that influence is incredible. But we're seeing the fruits of that already. And there was a lot of work put in over the last 4 years to make sure that, the right names were put up for the right places on folks that respect the Second Amendment. And we're seeing that. And this executive order is a great example. It's a short fuse. 30 days is as short of a fuse as anything in government. I mean, government moves like frozen molasses. So to see that type of urgency directing the Attorney General to review this is incredible. And that's the leadership that we need to see. So when you look at the order, what are the kind of things that are going to be in that report? Look, fixing all the problems at ATF. We've seen Joe Biden trample on the rights of gun owners for the last 4 years, and ATF was his weapon of choice to do that. We can get rid of zero tolerance, get rid of the frame and receiver rule, protect pistol braces, the most common firearm accessory in modern times. There are a litany of things getting into this crazy abuse of funding that went to red flags under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that NRA strongly opposed. There's a lot of minutia in there, and I have a list of about 3 pages long of items that we are going to suggest are included in that report. And I think it's going to be an evolving thing. I think we'll have this first report, and then that is going to lead into additional review, which is good. But most importantly, Cam, we need to get a pro-gun Senate-confirmed director of the ATF in there. We went through a long period with acting directors don't don't get anything done. No offense to anyone in that role. They just don't have the power that a Senate-confirmed director has. So it is critical in fixing that agency that we get someone who respects the Constitution into that role.
So, ILA, have anybody specific in mind, or are you just supporting a pro Second Amendment candidate?
We're supporting a qualified candidate for the role. There are a few names out there that certainly meet that criteria. However, we don't weigh in before the confirmation process officially on a named individual. But there are, for you and your listeners, there are qualified individuals who are being vetted right now. The key is just getting someone nominated, and then we can get to work on helping them get confirmed into that position.
You talk about that short fuse, that 30-day window, and you're absolutely right. That is a quick turnaround, and I am very interested to see what Attorney General Bondi's report looks like. One of the things beyond ATF, right? We saw one of the first things that was done was the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention went away. I do not think it is staffed. I don't think it's operational. There was a lot of talk in 2A circles before Trump was inaugurated for his second term about what to do with that office, right? Do you just close it down? Do you try to repurpose it for a White House Office of Second Amendment Promotion, White House Office of gun firearm education, maybe? Again, does the Institute for Legislative Action have any thoughts on what should happen within the executive branch in terms of staffing a White House office that would be dedicated to promoting and defending the right to keep and bear arms rather than, devoted to tearing it down?
Look, what we saw was an unprecedented politicization of the White House on Second Amendment issues. We saw Joe Biden creating this office, populating it with full-time gun control professionals. And it's just wrong. What we saw on day one was, I think everyone here saw the website get taken down right away. We're recommending that they include in the report from the Attorney General to formally disband that office, because it technically could still exist even though there's no one working there, which was a great first step. However, we need to formally disband that. Now, solutions to that, I've seen a lot of different suggestions out there, but do we really want to have that level of politicking happening in the White House on a constitutional issue? I think what we're seeing so far is, again, what I touched on earlier in the show is President Trump populating his office with professional staff that respect the Constitution and particularly respect the Second Amendment. I think that's important. These folks have a variety of different roles in the White House, but everyone he's surrounded himself with truly does respect the Constitution. I think that's a great first start, and there's a way to look at this. However, we have 4 years to get things done with President Trump, and then hopefully we have another 4 years to get things done with the next pro-gun president. However, you don't want to see a seesaw back and forth, especially when it comes to constitutional rights. So we'll be working with the White House to make sure that gun owners are represented and rights are restored as much as possible over these 4 years. But I think it's to be determined what outcome happens with that office, if it's changed or just totally removed.
All right. Listen, John, again, I really appreciate you taking some time to talk with us today. It is great having you on the show. Hope we get a chance to do this again very soon. And again, it is great to see NRA ramping back up, getting back in the arena with some of these legal fights. And obviously, you never went away in terms of the political fights, but I'm very pleased to see the NRA becoming more and more proactive by the day. So thank you very much for your time, John.
Thank you, Kim. Really appreciate it. Happy to come on anytime.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye, sir.
And thanks to John for joining us on the program. Looking forward to having him back again here in the very near future. And as I mentioned, tomorrow we're going to be talking with David Yamane from Wake Forest about Gun Culture 2.0. He had a piece at The Hill earlier this week. Guns are not just for conservative white men, which, as a conservative white guy, I'm totally okay with. This is, of course, a right of the people that we're talking about, and we, the people, don't just look like me. So, yeah, I think this is a wonderful thing. And again, we'll talk about it with David Yamane on tomorrow's program. Right now, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. A disturbing story out of Chicago. So here's the headline from CBS Chicago. Activists claim man has been wrongly jailed for more than 2 years on gun charges. The gentleman in question 35-year-old Ramon Banks. He is awaiting trial on felony charges of unlawful possession of a weapon by a felon, as well as aggravated unlawful use of a weapon. Now, according to CBS in Chicago, in October of 2022, police pulled over an SUV that Banks was riding in because of an expired license plate sticker. According to police report, when officers approached the vehicle, they saw Banks sitting in the front passenger seat, reaching for a gun on the floor directly behind the passenger seat. Banks said that police said that Banks ran off. He was arrested a short time later. Police said that Banks claimed he kept the gun on him for protection. Activists, however, accused the Chicago PD of planting the gun. They say that the body camera footage from Banks' arrest showed that officers could not have seen the firearm in plain view because the SUV had tinted rear windows. At one point in the body cam footage, you can actually hear the officers ask that the rear windows be rolled down so they can actually look into the back of the car. Jasmine Smith, who's an activist with the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, said what we would hear from the state if they respond is that this young man fled the scene and that it was a gun, but they never found a gun on him. The gun was planted inside the vehicle, a vehicle that was not his. Activists say that there are other inconsistencies in the officers' reports. CBS in Chicago says Chicago police have not immediately responded for a request for comment. You know, I've seen the body cam footage that was shared by the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Oppression. I wish that it was complete. It tends to, it goes from, one officer's perspective to another officer's perspective, but they do raise some troubling questions. I can't say with certainty that they're absolutely right, that the gun was planted in that vehicle, that Mr. Banks did not have possession of the firearm. But even beyond whether or not Mr. Banks is guilty of this crime, the fact that this happened in October of 2022, it is now February of 2025, and Ramon Banks has been sitting in the Cook County Jail for more than 2 years, going on 2.5 years now. That in itself is a problem. We do have certain rights in the criminal justice system, right? You have the right to have an attorney appointed if you cannot afford to pay for one. You don't have to represent yourself in a criminal proceeding, right? You have the right to a speedy trial. And we've actually seen cases dismissed in courts around the country because prosecutors have not brought cases forward in a timely manner. And judges have said, you can't just keep this person sitting behind bars cooling their jets for a year or more while you drag your feet taking this case to trial. And that, I think, is the biggest issue of all here. Again, I don't know if Mr. Banks is innocent or guilty of the crimes that he's accused of. I don't know if the Chicago police planted the gun or if they actually found the gun. I don't know any of that stuff. But what I do know is that if the Cook County State's Attorney's Office can't get their act together and prosecute a case within 2.5 years, there's no way that Ramon Banks should be sitting behind bars that entire time. Particularly when we see these cases in Illinois where individuals who are already out on bond for previous crimes are told, you know what, we're going to send you home with an electronic monitoring bracelet, right? And then they're arrested again and they're sent back home with a electronic monitoring bracelet. We know that the criminal justice system often treats repeat offenders with a slap on the wrist. So the fact that Ramon Banks has been cooling his heels in the Cook County Jail for over 2 years, I think that's a problem in and of itself. So we'll keep our eyes on this story and bring in more details as they become available. Today's armed citizen story from Fort Worth, Texas, where police say a man who broke into his ex-girlfriend's apartment was shot and killed on Sunday morning. It was about 11:30 when police were called out to the scene in Fort Worth, Texas. According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, when officers arrived, they found a man on the third floor landing of an apartment building. Detectives say that the man had broken into his ex-girlfriend's apartment and had confronted the ex-girlfriend and another man as they were about to enter the apartment. So apparently he was waiting inside for them. Now, police haven't said if this individual, identified as 37-year-old Michael James Andre, was armed at the time. But under Texas Castle Doctrine, you have a reasonable belief that your life is in jeopardy if someone has broken into your home. Now, apparently it was the male companion of this woman who fired the fatal shots. So I guess there might be some question as to whether or not the Castle Doctrine would apply to this woman's visitor, given that it wasn't his residence. But again, the spirit of the law is pretty clear. right? Even if the letter of the law says, well, it has to be your domicile, the spirit of the law, to me, suggests if you're with somebody, you're going to their home, you're armed, they're not, there's an intruder inside. Yes, you too are in fear. You have a reasonable belief of grievous bodily harm or fatal injuries. And you too have the right to act in self-defense. Police have not named a suspect in this case. They've said that the individual who shot Andre is cooperating with the investigation. They've not announced any arrests or anything of that nature, but they do say the investigation is ongoing. So again, we'll keep our eyes open for any more details. But I'd say based on the evidence that's been presented by law enforcement to date, this does sound like it's going to be a justifiable homicide and a justified use of force. All right, finally today, our good deed of the day in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A couple of guys in Louisiana who went fishing but ended up saving a life instead. This is different, by the way, than the good deed we had just a couple of days ago about two hunters. Actually, I guess it was three hunters in Louisiana, right? There was a dad, a son, and the son's friend who came to the aid of another hunter who suffered a medical emergency in his duck blind. Yeah, this is a different incident altogether. But once again, sportsmen in Louisiana stepping up. This is in Bermuda, Louisiana. Brock Newcomb and Tyler Dawsett were out fishing last Saturday when they saw a guy go off the road in his car and into the river. Nacogdoches Parish Sheriff Stuart Wright says what Brock and Tyler did, nothing short of heroic. They risked their own safety to help a stranger in need. Without their intervention, the outcome could have been much, much worse. So they were fishing on the Cane River near Bermuda, Louisiana, when an 80-year-old man veered off the highway, went down an embankment, and into water that's about 12 feet deep. Deputies say that the pair of fishermen initially mistook the vehicle for a submerged boat, but then they quickly realized it was a car. So they were in their boat. They raced over to the scene. They could see the driver inside as the car was sinking. So they started yelling at him, lower your window. Even though the 80-year-old driver appeared disoriented, he was able to comply with their commands. He lowered the window. Newcomb and Dawsett then got into the water. Were able to free the man. His feet were sort of tangled up there, but they grabbed the man by his belt. They pulled him through the window, brought him onto their boat, took him to a nearby boat launch, where I guess EMS workers arrived. Either they were there or a short time later after the fishermen showed up. They were able to take that 80-year-old man to the hospital. He is expected to survive. Sheriff said local residents and law enforcement officials have both expressed admiration for Newcomb and Dawsett. But they say, quote, we just did what anybody would do. We saw someone in need and did our best to help. We're just glad that we were able to get him out of there. Well, I think that goes for everybody in a Rapidish parish. So in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Brock Newcomb, Tyler Dawsett, we thank you for your very, very good deed. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you, as always, for being a part of the program. Looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Again, we'll be talking with David Yamane from Wake Forest University about Gun Culture 2.0. Be sure to check out BearingArms.com throughout the day. We're keeping you up to date on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information, litigation, regulation, whole lot of legislation these days, plus the armed citizen stories and the cultural attacks on our right to keep and bear arms. It's all waiting for you there at BearingArms.com. If you like what you see, I'd also encourage you to become a VIP, VIP Gold, or VIP Platinum member. You can get exclusive offerings, content, and more. But you'll also be supporting the independent pro-Second Amendment journalism that we're doing at Bearing Arms, and we greatly appreciate that support. Enjoy the rest of your Hump Day Wednesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.